Thanks so much for hanging out with us on the Daily Racing Forum YouTube. While you're watching this video, if you could head down and subscribe to the channel, that would be helpful to us, and it'll let you know every time we have race previews just like this. I'm Gino Bacola alongside David Aragona. We head out to Aqueduct for the second time this weekend. On Saturday, they have a couple New York New York Stallion Series races, David. First, we talked about the fillies and mares and the sprinters. That was in race number 7. Race number 8, we'll talk about the 3-year-olds and up going 7 furlongs on the main track. Let's look at the field. We have the odds for this one. Race number 8 on Saturday, November the 23rd. A couple of the horses in here I felt like would take a good amount of money. Antonio of Venice and Doc Sullivan. They feel like kind of that top tier. And you have Antonio of Venice, who had an interruption to his season. He was a horse who had an injury that caused him to miss some time. He was prepping for a race back in June, and so he was backed up a little bit. We actually haven't seen him race since April. Doc Sullivan, major player. He actually tried Open Company, David, in the Pennsylvania Derby last time out, and he was only 10-1 when he lost to Seize the Gray against Open Company there. So those feel like the top 2 in here, at least to start with.
Yeah, sometimes these Stallion Series races feel like they come up a little bit hungry, not really sure if the horses that wind up in here are true stakes quality runners. That's not the case with this Thunder Rumble division. There are some really nice horses in here, horses that have been competitive against Open Company, as you highlighted. Those 2 3-year-olds, Doc Sullivan and Antonio Venice, they both run some nice speed figures on the way in, and they appear to fit this spot very well.
Yeah, so let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector and see what our friends at Timeform US think. And it doesn't look like there's that much early speed in here. This isn't surprising to me, where they have Antonio and Venice right up on the front end. And after that, a couple others who are pressers and some others that may be able to use some tactical speed as a weapon, but not a bunch of need the lead type horses in this group, David.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I pegged Antonio Venice as the morning line favorite. It just feels like he's going to get the trip that he prefers in this race on the front end, not getting a whole lot of pressure. A horse like Chucho Bello, the number 4, does have the speed to be forward, but going 7 furlongs, I think that's a bit of a question mark, because Antonio Venice just seems like a horse with more natural gas on the front end. So I imagine he's going to make the lead in here, and it's just a question of whether or not he's ready off the layoff.
Let's meet the field for this one as we start with Dr. Kraft from the inside. Stumbled badly at the start, so had to come from a little farther back than they would have liked last time out. But, he's had a pretty good 2024. He's been in the money in each of his starts. Only the 1 victory in 8 starts, but showed up and been very consistent throughout. Will that consistency play into a tough race like this? Because you were pointing out, this is a strong race for this type of level.
Yeah, consistency is both an asset and sort of a knock against this horse, because he's consistently too slow to win a race like this. Yep. And he just continues to run the same race over and over again and continues to settle for minor awards. He's finished 2nd or 3rd 14 times in 20 starts with those 2 victories. So won't be surprised when he gets a piece of it. Would be a little bit surprised if he actually comes out on top against this field.
BD Saints was a horse who I was trying to get to a little bit here, David, because his form recently is a lot better on the grass, but you just keep going back to those dirt races and they're not that great. I think you can make excuses for some of them. Was stakes placed on a race that was a muddy track race back in 2023 in the Sleepy Hollow and finishing 2nd that day. There's some main track form there, but just not a whole heck of a lot. Most recently, we've been seeing this horse going longer on the turf where they've been successful.
I really wanted to go for this horse because he does have that sealed track race that makes him, at least equal talented on both dirt and turf. It's the problem, as you said, is that's the one race where he was competitive on the dirt and it was a sealed track. And sometimes turf horses are able to translate their form to sealed tracks better than harrowed dry tracks. I think the thing he has going for him is his last 2 races are so much better than anything he's produced previously this year when he won that first level allowance, but especially last time, that loss against 2nd level New York Bred allowance horses. He got a ridiculous trip in that race. He was rank early, no cover, 4 wide around the turns. He had no business finishing nearly 3rd in that spot. He was just beaten for 3rd by, I think, a nose at the wire. He ran so well that day. If he translates that form to dirt, he's a major player in here. It's just a question of the surface.
Doc Sullivan is one of those major players, no doubt about it. Pennsylvania Derby, they took a shot last time out. Seize the Gray just went and was lone speed in that race. So Doc Sullivan, after a slow starts, never really got involved. But we go a couple starts back. Doc Sullivan was in some battles with a very nice horse named Panda Gate. And Doc Sullivan at this level is just a really good fit.
Yeah, he makes a lot of sense in this race. Gino, I think we previewed that Pennsylvania Derby in a video together, and I know you raised your eyebrows when I picked Doc Sullivan in that race. And watching that replay back, I'm not too ashamed of that pick.
No.
I wonder about the ride that he got that day. It seemed like Jose Ortiz, for whatever reason, was just intent on dragging this horse not just back to last, but about 5 lengths behind the second to last horse. I didn't really get that. This horse has a lot more tactical speed than that. Mike Maselli didn't seem to understand that when he was giving some pre-race quotes for this race. So Javier Castellano, who's ridden this horse before, is back on board, as he showed in that Mike Lee victory. He's got the tactical speed to sit pretty close to a pace going 7 furlongs, and he just makes a whole lot of sense in here. When he's lost to some pretty good horses this year, and I kind of view him as the horse to beat.
Yeah, and he has just the more recent form than Antonio Venice, right? If you're just looking at those two as like two of the top tier horses, this horse, we have less concerns about him, where you have a horse like Antonio Venice, who we do have to see prove it coming off a bit of an injury and a bit of a layoff. We move to CC Obello, the number 4 in here, is a horse who I thought it was a bit interesting value play, just purely from pace projection in a race where there's not that much early speed. Could this horse be sitting 3rd or 4th? And maybe if Antonio Venice is a little bit short coming off the layoff, trying to get 7 furlongs, I could see this horse being one that hangs around there and maybe outruns the odds. So a big price for me, David. And I don't know how good overall he is, but I could see him being one of those types of horses that trips out in this type of a race and maybe falls into a really good spot and could get a nice share.
Yeah, I've liked this horse at different points in the past, and he can be a little random at times. You never really know exactly when he's going to show up with one of those good efforts because he is fairly inconsistent. But when Derek Ryan has him right, this horse can really run. He showed that 3-back when I actually liked him in that Evan Shipman. I think he was the biggest price in the race and gave me a thrill until mid-stretch and just kind of got overtaken by some superior rivals. But those horses like Beg Frenzy and Maker's Candy, I mean, they'd be favorites in this race, and they're not in here. So I think he fits well. What I don't love is that he's drawn inside of Antonio Venice, and I don't know if he's quick enough to stay with that horse early. So I worry a little bit he could get shuffled back along the inside. But if Jose Lezcano can get him to the outside of that rival in a 2-path stalking trip, I think that makes him dangerous.
We've seen him mainly going long. I think he has one race going 6.5 furlongs and one going 7, and they were like in the slop and before a long layoff. So probably didn't really get a good feel or a gauge for if this horse could be okay in that like elongated sprint race, and maybe get a little fitness on the cutback here. Light Man is another one that fits with this level. I'm just a little worried about the possible pace projection because he has some positional speed, and Carmouche is a very good and aggressive rider. I just don't know how naturally fast this horse is, or maybe in comparison to a couple of the other major contenders. So Light Man in nice form coming off that Hudson win last time out, and 2 starts back, he's behind a horse named Federal Judge, who goes on to win the Grade 2 Phoenix last time out and then set the pace in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. He has good recent form.
Yeah, he's pretty good, and I thought he ran well to get the job done this day with a very good trip. I mean, it just couldn't have worked out any better from a tactical standpoint for Lightman in this Hudson. You had 3 horses battling it out on the front end. He was sitting behind that duel, took over from Rotney, who might have run actually the best race of anybody, finishing 3rd in that day, given the way the pace fell apart, and Lightman had enough left to hold off a horse like Silver Satin. I think this is a slightly tougher spot than that one, and I wonder if the trip is going to work out as well as it did, and you're probably not going to get the 8-1 that he was last time.
Number 6, Antonio Venice, is a very nice 3-time stakes winner who likes Aqueduct and was really rounding into very nice form. He came off a 91 Beyer speed figure back in April when he won a stakes race, and it was his 2nd consecutive stakes win. Then after that, he was prepping for the Mike Lee Stakes in June, and he got a bruised foot. So that bumped everything back for him. Now he shows up, and obviously for a horse like him with talent, you just always have to wonder about how much an injury like that takes out of you, if you're going to be able to come back the same way you left, which was very, very good.
Yeah, whatever the excuse is, I never like to see horses go to the sidelines when they appear to be just reaching their peak form. To me, that's usually a negative. But it does seem like he's working up a storm coming back for this race. You look at his work tab and just reeling off bullet after bullet at 46 and 3 drill back from the end of October. It seems like Rudy Rodriguez has him primed for a good effort coming back off the layoff, and he couldn't have landed in a better spot from a speed standpoint because he just seems like he's naturally quicker than these horses early. 7 furlongs furlongs, the perfect distance for him. That speed figure that he earned when we last saw him back in April, with any natural progression as a 3-year-old towards the end of the season, he might just be better than these horses. I just don't know if he's going to offer much value as one of the shorter prices.
Yeah, that's the key. He's landed in such a good spot without that other early speed to push him. Shouldn't have to work all too hard in here. We'll see if Antonio Venice is up to task off that long layoff. Kaz Sugar Bank has 7 lifetime wins, David, but 6 of them are at Penn, and only been in stakes races a few times and seemed kind of overmatched in those spots.
Yeah, it just doesn't really seem to class up with this field. He's never run a speed figure that makes him competitive. I couldn't make the case for this one.
The hardest horse I had in this race to get a read on was the outside runner, General Banker, mainly because of the race shape, that it could be a little enigmatic, because General Banker fits with this group on class, on speed figures in a lot of ways. I'm a little worried about the trip, but I think you're not quite as concerned about the trip with General Banker in here, who's multiple graded stakes placed and who actually beat Open Company just a couple starts back at Belmont and Aqueduct in October.
I'm a little bit unsure about whether or not the pace is going to work out for him in this race, but what I'm not lacking confidence in is his ability. I mean, he seems like he stacks up against this field perfectly. He's actually been keeping arguably better company than what he's facing here. That allowance race that he was involved in 3 back going this distance in September was extremely tough. Reddington put in a huge performance to win that day as a long shot, but there were some really nice horses both in front and behind him that day, and then came back to win at the Open N1X level in his next start, beating some good horses from top barns. And I thought he didn't run as badly as it looks in the Empire Classic last time. He was wide around both turns, got pushed even wider around the far turn. 9 furlongs was always going to be a stretch for this horse. Now he's turning back to 7, which is the right distance for him. And he's drawn outside, so I'm hoping Luis Rivera doesn't get shuffled back and can sort of send him forward a little bit to get into that mid-pack stalking position. And maybe he won't have too much ground to make up.
Well, there's the field for race number 8 on Saturday at Aqueduct, the second of 2 stakes races. Let's see how you're going to get to your selections here, David. I believe you went to the outside, right, with General Banker?
Yeah, I was really kind of torn between General Banker and Doc Sullivan, who I think are have similar ability. I just felt like General Banker was going to be the slightly better price of the 2 of them, so I put them on top. Do have some interest in that number 2, BD Saints, but just wasn't totally convinced about the surface.
Yeah, there were a couple too, like the 2 who I was interested in, at least as an under type. I ended up going with the 4, hoping we can get a nice trip there and some nice value, maybe a horse who could fall into it on the turn back and just have a little more fitness late there. So 4, 3, 6, 5 for me, 8, 3, 2, 6 for David. We wish you the best of luck on Saturday over at Aqueduct.
If you enjoyed this video, please click the like and subscribe button below for more great DRF content, including race of the days, stakes previews, and lots more. You can find it right here.